I would like to thank all of you for taking time to come here today for this announcement. As all of you know, my name is Alan Wilson. I am the Attorney General of South Carolina. And when I ran for this job back in 2010, one of the things that was the most important to me was protecting South Carolina families and putting them first. Public safety is the fundamental core function of government at all levels, and when I ran, I decided I was going to make that a staple of my campaign and a staple of my administration as Attorney General. As I traveled the state, I've always put the needs of law enforcement first because, in my opinion, law enforcement is the most important thing that people care about. It doesn't matter what political party you are in. It doesn't matter what your views are, whether you're rich or whether you're poor. Everyone wants to feel safe, and everyone has a right to feel safe. As Attorney General, over the last several years, I have had the opportunity to serve with some of the best and brightest in the law enforcement community. Since 2011, we have, in the Attorney General's office, we have been at the forefront in the middle of helping draft legislation to reform the domestic violence laws of South Carolina to better aid prosecutors and law enforcement officials in how they prosecute and investigate domestic violence crimes. In 2011, there was no human trafficking statute on the books. We were able to help play a major role in drafting the human trafficking laws in South Carolina that took South Carolina from one of the worst states in the country to one of the best states in the country on enforcement of human trafficking. We have prosecuted dozens upon dozens of human trafficking cases statewide using all of our task force members. Our task force began in 2012 going after human trafficking with 12 members. We now have over 300 human trafficking members on our task force. Another area that we've been very focused on is protecting our children. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force has grown so much over the last several years. When I was elected Attorney General, there were 44 law enforcement agencies that were out there working to protect our kids from online predators and pedophiles. We have gone from 44 law enforcement agencies to 108 law enforcement agencies. There have been over 750 Internet Crimes Against Children prosecutors. 750 predators and pedophiles have been prosecuted by our office over the last 7 years through that task force and the initiatives that we have worked with frontline law enforcement officers. In addition to protecting our children and going after human trafficking, as well as reforming our domestic violence laws, I'm very proud of the efforts we have gone to hold public officials accountable, those who violate the trust. Our office has been at the forefront of prosecuting public corruption around the state of South Carolina. The last thing I want to talk about as it relates to the law enforcement community is consolidating all of the crime victims services at the state level to better support our police chiefs, our sheriffs, our prosecutors, our faith groups, our victims advocacy and victim services providers. Just several months ago, we dispersed $38 million in federal grant money, and we expect over $50 million going to local communities this fall to support those people who have been abused or victimized due to some type of crime perpetuated against them. I am very honored that to have received nearly 50% of the votes in Tuesday night's election. This is an election in which there were 3 individuals running, and to have been able to have nearly won without a runoff is truly an honor. But since that time, I have been inundated with calls of support from around the state of men and women, military officials, law enforcement officers and officials who have said that it is important to them that the Attorney General be someone who understands law enforcement. I'm here today to say that I'm the only candidate who has ever actually been in a courtroom that is running for Attorney General. I'm the only candidate who has ever prosecuted a case. I'm the only candidate that has actually worked hand in hand with law enforcement officials from around the state. And law enforcement officials recognize that they need an Attorney General who is going to be the chief prosecutor of the state and who has actually prosecuted cases and worked with law enforcement officials. No one else running in this race has done that. And I'm here today as the only proven prosecutor, the only person who has the experience to protect South Carolina families and uphold the rule of law, to say that I am honored to be in this runoff, and I look forward to winning in less than 2 weeks. I'm standing here today flanked by 2 men who I have a great deal of respect for. And I'm honored that they were willing to come out and support our candidacy and support our platform for protecting South Carolina citizens. Representative Micah from here in Lexington County and Sheriff Koon, Lexington County Sheriff. Micah is someone I've known for many, many years, over 20 years actually, 25 years. We're getting old, Micah. Over 25 years, and know his family, and I was so excited. Micah has actually worked been a prosecutor, and having been a frontline prosecutor, understands the importance that we elect a prosecutor to the job of chief prosecutor. And I'm going to let him speak in a few seconds, but I want to thank Micah for coming out. Over the coming days, you're going to see more endorsements like Micah's, but I appreciate his service not only as a Marine, but also as a member of the House of Representatives. And Micah, I am truly honored and humbled to have your support and your friendship. It means so much to me. Additionally, another person who I am incredibly proud to have their support, and he's got my support, and that is our Sheriff Jay Koon. Jay is part of a 21 sheriff coalition, and that coalition is growing. There are 20 other sheriffs who've endorsed our campaign for Attorney General. I'm proud to have my hometown sheriff, Jay Koon, who I think is a hero in the law enforcement community. He's the tip of the spear protecting our citizens, and having Jay stand here beside me today means so much to me. You and your family are just dear friends, Jay, and I appreciate your support. I will close with this, and I will hand it off. We all have something in common, other than the fact that we're all either married or dating someone who's better than we are. All of us are Eagle Scouts, and all of us having gone through the scouting program, he and I having served in the military and having a career law enforcement officer here who understand what public service is about, having learned that from the scouting program, is honored to stand up here with two fellow Eagle Scouts before you today and talk about our vision for South Carolina. At this time, Micah, I want to thank you for your support and appreciate you being here.
Thank you, General. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm honored and humbled to have this chance to express my support for Alan Wilson. As the General mentioned, I've had the pleasure of knowing Alan for over 25 years. We both grew up in Springdale. We both became Eagle Scouts, served in the military in combat situations. But we share another bond, as he mentioned, and that is in the courtroom. We have both stood and prosecuted crimes, violent crimes, drug crimes, crimes against children, and that experience cannot be understated. It's my fervent belief that what we need, what we have to have, is an Attorney General who understands what it means to prosecute crimes, and Alan Wilson is the only one in this race who's ever prosecuted a criminal case. Now, some will tell you that all cases are the same, civil cases are no different, and that frankly is just not true. The unique considerations that we have to keep in mind when prosecuting crimes are unique. And we've got to have someone at the top who understands what it means to prosecute criminal cases. And Alan Wilson is the only one in this race who's done it. So I'm glad to stand here with him today, to be with my friend, and to throw my support behind him full steam. And I look forward to his success and would encourage anyone who's listening to vote for Alan Wilson in the Attorney General race here in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Sheriff.
Also happy to be here. I've known Alan a long time, back from his prosecuting days in our 11th Circuit. And I've been in a courtroom when he's prosecuted cases and watched him go to the AG's office. And as AG, he's always answered a call for law enforcement through the human trafficking and internet crimes against children and our gangs. He's always helping us fight crime and reach out to our victims. So I'm happy to stand here and endorse him today along with over 20 of sheriffs and my colleagues. We know Alan's the right man for the job.
Thank you, Sheriff. I also want to thank the Sheriff publicly. Not only thank you for the endorsement, but the Lexington County Sheriff's Department as well as other law enforcement agencies in Lexington have been so supportive on not just the Task Force for Human Trafficking, but on internet crimes against children. They've dedicated law enforcement officers to go out there and protect our children and support our initiatives to keep South Carolina families safe. Thank you for being a leader in that area as well as in the human trafficking and gang prosecution area. So at this time, I'm happy to receive any questions that you may have.
I would ask, the runoff that we've got going here, one interesting element of it is we got two folks from Lexington County, and the two of you today have chosen one of those over the other. As Lexington voters consider which of their two native sons they're going to vote for 2 weeks from now, why should they choose Alan Wilson over Todd Atwater? And Representative Caskey, of course, Todd Atwater is a colleague of yours in the State House, so why would you choose the Attorney General over him in this race?
Well, I think it comes down to one fact, and that is that the Attorney General is the chief prosecutor in our state. And the ultimate responsibility for prosecuting crimes rests on his shoulders. In my belief, and I think the belief of many of my neighbors in Lexington County, is that we've got to have somebody that's done it before. This is not a field where we can just have a politician stand in for whatever reason he chooses to seek some elevated status. We've got to make sure that at the end of the day, our cases are prosecuted, and the way to get there, I think, is through having a chief prosecutor who's ever actually prosecuted a case.
Sheriff, I don't know if
echo
you know
that.
that as well.
Experience matters. Alan's got a proven track record of what he's been doing and works well with all law enforcement, and that's why I think he's the guy for the job.
You know, Jamie, I would offer this, and what these guys said is absolutely true. When you're the chief prosecutor of the state, you have supervisory authority over the dockets of all the solicitors, as well as 30 prosecutors working for you. I have to sign off on every indictment that comes across my desk. Having prosecuted cases most of my legal career prior to being the Attorney General, you have to understand what it's like to be a line prosecutor. You can't hire someone to empathize and understand what that's like. You have to have actually been there to understand how the system works, and that is why I think I'm best qualified. And then another thing is, what I thought was interesting about the election results on Tuesday. I believe nearly 56% of Lexington County residents voted for me in a three-way race, and I think 57% of Richland County residents voted for me in a three-way race. So the people of the Midlands, who know all the candidates the best, overwhelmingly understood and understand that we want a prosecutor, and we think Alan Wilson's the right person to be the next Attorney General.